Welcome to Fascism on Film. I'm James Kent. Along with me is Teal. We are here on Season 2, Episode 12. This is the last episode of our season, which takes us to almost the end of the year. Don't worry. Hey, we got you. We're going to be back. We're going to be back.
We got a very long list of movies we're working from. We will be back. We will be doing this for a while until we get through our list.
Well, we may never get through the whole list because, you know what, if we got through all 200 plus movies on the list.
Oh, no. I was
there's
thinking
some dregs.
I was thinking of the list that's only 80 or 90 films.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, that's how many films. Now, there are some very specific movies that are about, fascism, like Italian fascism or the Nazis, their version of fascism, and World War II. And then there's the aftermath of World War II. We haven't even really got into what a lot of people think about when it comes to these fascist movies is the Holocaust. And
yeah, and the war.
And the war.
The war, which is that final stage of fascism that Paxton talks about, which is radicalization and to full-on violence through external expansion through war and internal cleansing through concentration and death camps.
What he said. And we're not avoiding the topic. It's just that we feel that before we get into films like that, and we're not going to dump all of that into one season. Nobody wants that. That would be hard to watch all those. And we've seen them. We've seen them, just like we've seen many of the Hitler bunker movies and all sorts of films. But we don't feel like we need to get there yet. We got a lot of other stuff to talk about. And some of it, I'll be quite honest, has been shaped by what's happened in our country in the past year. And sometimes we're influenced a little bit about some of the things that we see that are going on. And so we look for films that might resonate with a listener. If they go and check it out, they might say, oh, well, geez, I see some of these things happening in my country right now. And I think if we can do that, if we can make that correlation, then you can understand some of the tenets of fascism a little bit better than if we show you something from 80 years ago and then just say, try to remember those good old days and hope they don't happen again. So the film that we're going to talk about today is Walter Salles' 2024 film, I'm Still Here. It's a movie that came out towards the end of last year and probably hit theaters around January, and it was nominated for Best Picture. It won for Best International Film, and then its star was nominated for Best Actress, which is a truly amazing performance. Oh, and just before I want to let Teal take over here, because what's interesting is I saw it in the theater. I saw it in January in the theater, and it was like either right before the new administration took over here, or was it just right after the inauguration? And while watching the movie, I had a pit in my stomach for most of it. And what kept rolling around in my head as the images unfolded was I saw a potential of things that I could be concerned about in this country. And now, having watched it again the other day, I had a different feeling that some of what I saw seemed almost all too familiar. And so the thing was that Teal hadn't seen it back then in January, and I know he's seen it now, but we haven't had a chance to talk about the film. So this will be an interesting movie to talk about, not just for some of the aspects more on authoritarianism and military dictatorship than necessarily fascism. However, there's definitely some tenets of fascism at play in this movie, but I'm very interested in hearing Teal's perspective.
Yeah, so I think we need to be clear about this. This was a military dictatorship, not a fascist dictatorship. Although the way they act is very similar. The ideology is a little bit different. Their tactics are very similar. They do crack down on dissent. They disappear people. There is violence. People are taken and tortured. All these tactics that we see from fascists are almost the exact same here. And since this is a film that isn't necessarily about those people that are running things, it's not necessarily political in that sense. It's really about the family and the everyday life. And this is something we've been talking about a lot, is sort of what is everyday life like under that type of authoritarian control.
One of the things I like about this film, it's kind of an in media res. It drops you in, and it doesn't give you a lot of pretexts or just understanding of what's happening. You get a one caption thing that says Brazil under military dictatorship, and it's
Yeah.
1970. It's like December of 1970. And then it drops you in, and you have to kind of go along the ride with this movie, and details will emerge. And
Hmm.
it's an interesting directorial approach where we don't have a lot of scenes where characters are going to like data dump and kind of explain stuff for you. Some of the characters are just as in the dark. We have a
Yes.
family. It's a real family called the Pava family or the Pava family. There's a husband, seems very loving, like really great guy. He's an architect. He has this family of like 4 daughters and 1 son and a wife. They're the upper class, definitely.
They have domestic help. They have a live-in maid nanny, and they have a very beautiful big house, and they're
By the beach of Rio, by the way. Like, they're
by the
like
beach in Rio. Yeah, so no, they're well off. They're definitely upper middle class at least, and
and they're building their dream home, by the way. They've got
yes,
he's designing somewhere nearby like an even better house.
yeah, they've got a plot of land. And they've got plans for the future. I think that's part of the house, is that it's showing us that these are people who are just living their lives. They're going forward, making their dreams come true and taking care of their children. And it's a very loving, active family.
And you really get caught up. It takes a lot of time invested in this first part of the movie, a good 40 minutes, to
Yeah,
really make you feel like you know these people. But the film shows these little cracks. There's interesting
yeah,
stuff. The husband, he's a former congressman before the military dictatorship, and he had left with his family, and they came back. And then he basically abandoned politics and he started,
yeah.
doing his trade, which is an architect and designer. And yet there's sometimes he's on the phone with people. He's got these
Hmm.
envelopes. He's doing something, but we don't really know. He's got friends and they all feel much more leftist than obviously the government.
Yes.
Some friends, they're closing their bookshop and they're going to England. They're going to be expatriates, and they offer to take their oldest daughter because the family's a little concerned that the daughter could be politically motivated as a student and that she could get under the crossfire of the military dictatorship. So they send her off to go to England with them. So then, aside from those things, and you hear on the news that there's been some kidnapping of ambassadors, that's making the military crackdown a little bit harder on people.
Yeah, and there is this idea too that's brought up of maybe the whole family should go to London. And the father keeps saying, "No, this is all going to pass. This will go away eventually. We don't have to worry. We'll protect the daughter who's a hippie, send her away, but we'll be fine here." There's that sense of, yes, this is going on, but it doesn't really affect us yet.
The movie kind of lulls you into this, like, oh, this is just kind of this interesting slice of life movie from 70s. It's got kind of like a groovy, cool Brazilian soundtrack of songs.
Hmm.
And it's shot, I think it was shot in Super 16, and it
Okay.
has a very cool look. Like, you're like, how did they make this thing look like the 70s? Like, this thing just doesn't, it has such a great vibe.
Yeah.
And it's handled so well that you're really just fascinated in these lives. And then suddenly, with like just out of nowhere, the domestic kind of comes in, and they're sitting there playing backgammon and just having a
Yeah.
good time and talking about the future. And before she can even say like you got to come to the door, these men have just entered their house.
Yeah, and there's quite a few of them.
There's quite a few of them, yes, and they're really like these leather jackets and kind of like a weird sort of uniform that's like they're military, but they're not military. It's weird.
They're more like thugs, and they kind of show up and disperse themselves around the house. So much of this movie takes place in this house and for extended sequences, and they kind of spread out, and there's like one in every room, and sort of anywhere she goes or the kids go, there's a guy there. And they say, we've got to talk to your husband. We've got to ask him some questions. And they go and tell him, and he says, okay, well, let me change first. And he goes, put on a suit and tie, and they say, oh, that's fine. And they're not threatening violence directly. They're not angry. They're not yelling. They're not grabbing him. They're just saying, come with us.
Yeah, except that one of them visibly has a gun.
Absolutely. Yes, they're armed. Yes, the threat of violence is there. They just don't actually use it.
Well, that's what's so great about this scene is that it's unnerving and there's implied like menace and violence without showing any violence. And the husband doesn't show this panic look on his face, but and we know that he knows that this is not good and that him having to go with them, he has no real choice. He wants to protect his family. And then the first sort of shoot a drop in your stomach is not just like when he goes away, but okay, you're thinking, though, this is awful. Now the movie's going to be about, well, what happens to him? Are we going to know what happens to him? But no. Aside from the people that take him away, the other people stay in the house and say, we have to stay here.
Yes, all those men stay there and they change shifts. She initially tries to sort of give them some food and some coffee, but they just are there. They are just present, and I think it goes on for several days.
At least for 24 hours. And so this is where the performance of the lead actor, Fernanda Torres, it was so phenomenal, is the way she has to conduct, and you're watching her, how she performs under the duress of her husband is gone, but she can't panic too much. She has all her kids there. They're coming in and out. She can't let them know that something bad's happened. But yet at the same time, there's these men that won't leave, and she knows it's bad. And you're watching her body language ever so subtly change. She wants to just scream out, and she can't.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I had read after that any scene in this entire movie where she was breaking down and crying, they cut out.
Oh, wow.
The director and her thought, let's not show her ever cry. Well, it's implied that there's moments where she probably has to, but that's not what we want out of this character.
There is a moment where she finds out for the first time that he's dead.
Spoiler alert! Sorry.
It is a true story. It is a true story.
I will say, though, when I saw that, I did not know. I know just the way that the movie was going, I felt like this guy is not alive. However, I did not know for sure until she knows for sure.
And there's this moment where she finds out, the friend tells her she's left alone in the room. And a few minutes later, the daughter comes in and says, are you crying? Or have you been crying? And she says, no. And that's really the only moment, and we don't see it on screen. We know that she's cried, but we don't see it on screen. And I think so much of this movie, and the way he goes about it that morning when they come to get him. But you said that she's keeping it together for her family, and that's what we see in this performance. Like you mentioned, her body language. She's holding it together so that the kids don't fall apart, and she has to present this fairly solid vision of herself for the kids and to take care of the family. But inside, she's disintegrating and collapsing. And it's just amazing to watch her hold it together on the outside while falling apart on the inside.
Yeah, and I think during the filming of the movie, and they filmed it in order, too.
Oh, okay.
They filmed it in order. She lost, I think, 12 pounds. She was very thin to begin with, but to show like the duress, because we jumped over a little bit as Teal, spoiler alert, Minton told you that the guy died. But so they go from these guys staying in their house and won't leave to then suddenly she's like, wants to know what's going on with her husband. And they're like, oh, well, forget that. You and the oldest daughter that's still in the house, because the other one's in England, are coming with
Yeah.
us because we want to ask you guys some questions. And now she's put through the ringer at this creepy sort of military barracks, which is where
Yes.
the husband was also brought because she sees at some point, I think when she's finally released a couple of weeks later, by the way,
Yeah.
she sees his car. And so she knows that he was there. The daughter was released ahead of her
After a day. Yeah.
but she doesn't know that, and the whole experience, this whole time, from when these guys first show up at the house to while she's there at this barracks, sort of being questioned under duress over like whether she knows this person or that person, it is very unnerving to watch. It is tough to watch this movie, I would say.
And you really don't know what's going to happen to her. You don't know if she's going to be tortured. You assume that she's going to be released because the movie's not over yet. But it is harrowing when she's in there, and there's a prison guard who takes her between rooms, and he actually says, "I want you to know I don't approve of this," and he's trying to sort of be kind to her. And there's this sense of humanity that happens in these situations where the people that are questioning her have dehumanized her to the point where she she looks frail and like she's falling apart. And so that dehumanization happens. And then this one prison guard is sort of a little bit of a human connection that shows her there is humanity out there.
Yes, in the future movie that we may someday see, there'll be that one ICE agent who will say, I don't approve of this. I want you to know that.
Yeah, but is still going along with it. Is still following orders, even though they don't approve.
Well, I think that shows you that when these things happen, right, people get swept up. And at one point, this guy may have been in the military before the dictatorship, and it's not like he can just get out.
Right.
And so I think that, like, a long story short, this is what's crazy is the thing that the husband actually was doing. He was with some of his friends. They were doing very little non-military aspect of resistance. They were delivering letters from people to other family members so that they knew that they were okay and this and that. They were doing little things, maybe giving some money here and there to people in need. They were doing very small things that they felt they could do in amount of safety. But of course, when the crackdown happened, they would start to bring these people in, torture them, get names, and then those names they brought in and so forth. And I can't remember. I did some research after, and what's sad is that the guy in question, the husband, he was killed within like that first night, I think, or the next day.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought it had been a little bit longer.
No. They did. And I think probably what happened is, right, is they beat these people and sometimes they take it too far and then oops, he's dead. And now they've got to like dispose of the body and then the evidence trail. And so, a lot of the rest of the film, once she's back at home, is trying to keep her family together. Interesting is that she doesn't want people to know that her husband's missing. She tries to get money from the bank. And of course, as we've seen in a lot of movies that are set in times not now, is that wives didn't always have control of their bank accounts. It was all the husband. She couldn't even get money out.
And she can't get money out because he technically is just away for a little while. And everyone thinks he's going to be coming back.
Yeah, they don't know. And the government denies responsibility. They say he wasn't arrested. And part of the film is in order to get proof that he might be killed or alive, she has to prove that he was even arrested.
Yes.
So some of the film is trying to manage her family, keep them tight, keep a brave face. You slowly but surely watch little things dissolve. They have to eventually sell that piece of property so she has money. Then they have to get rid of their domestic person. Then they have to sell their house and move to the city away from the beach. But that's pretty much the biggest, that kind of ends that chapter. But then the movie does something that I think was pretty fascinating. It ends where we do find out that, he's dead, but she still doesn't have the proof. The government has not going to say that they killed him or responsible. And then you go ahead
25 years.
And what's fascinating is the Brazilian dictatorship lasted to the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
It's a long time. And then it made me think of another film that is great, and it's in Brazil, and Walter Salles was a producer on it, was City of God. And
Oh, yeah.
lot of the film, City of God, takes place in the 70s, some of it, and some of it in the early 80s. And you realize that the economic conditions that happen in Brazil as a result of this military dictatorship let the favelas grow and become unattainable, and these gangs just thrived under the military dictatorship. And that is what eventually led to the end of the dictatorship in Brazil, is because people had enough. They said no. They finally, and even the people that were running everybody had had enough. She, in the meantime, because it was like, it's again, fascism, the whole family probably would have been taken and put into a camp and then killed. Under this dictatorship, right, she was allowed to she went and became a lawyer.
Yeah, she went back to school, becomes a lawyer, and sort of devotes her life to taking on the government in a few different ways. One is sort of indigenous people, land rights, and the other is this sort of disappeared people, and that she uses her law knowledge to continue to investigate. And finally, in that 25 years later bit, she gets his death certificate. And something we've talked about before in fascism and authoritarianism is the paperwork angle. And we see this like in Mr. Klein, and that they essentially hide his arrest and his death under a bunch of paper that she can't access or get through. And sort of this bureaucracy just swallows people up and disappears them.
It's like they keep records and then they make sure that you don't get to see the records.
Exactly.
This is sort of like an epilogue type in the movie.
There's 2 epilogues, yeah.
The last one is where she has dementia, and it's actually, this is amazing, is she's towards the end of her life, and she's in a wheelchair, and she's dementia, and she's, very old at this point. And the actress who plays the older version of her is her real life acting mom.
Oh, wow. I was thinking that was really good makeup.
No. That's her mom in real life. Her mom was in one of Walter Salles' breakthrough films called Central Station, and she was the first Brazilian actress ever to receive an Academy Award nomination. And now her daughter, years later, is the second.
That is fascinating. Wow.
And that's why they look so much alike, because they're mother and daughter, but like it's pretty amazing. And there's a really interesting thing that I don't know on first watch that I was able to pick up on it to this degree. And it kind of lends itself to that I'm still here. And one of it is that, just because they've disappeared him, she's still there. She's not leaving. She's not going anywhere. But another thing that's throughout this movie is memories of family and the importance of photography, of taking pictures. That comes in on several key things at the beginning. Those photographs, and the oldest daughter is really into films, and she has a Super 8 camera, and she's taking some very cool pictures with her Super 8 camera. And when she goes to England, she makes like a little bit of a movie with her camera about what's going on in England. And then she writes a letter that's sort of the narration, and the family reads the letter while they're watching the movie. But then, like, even at the end, right? She's obviously at the end of her life, and all her kids now have grandkids, and they're all together, and they go together and have this big group picture. And it's very important, right? Sort of that idea that we don't want to forget who our family members are. And it's very important to have her in the picture. And it harkens back to this very key thing at the beginning of the movie, the last time that the whole family would all be together and happy. And that is the going away party for the daughter who's going to England. They're all there, all their friends and family at the beach, and they take this picture. And then that comes back later where the mom, and I think this is in the first epilogue, that she's looking at these photos, and one of the daughters says, "Oh, well, what was that?" And she lies to the daughter and says that it was at a birthday or something. And then when the daughter leaves, she labels it, and she knows that it's that moment, maybe a couple of weeks before, whatever, that the last time that they were all together as a family. And it's so painful for her. And then what's amazing is they recreate a few photos of the husband and wife like on their honeymoon and stuff. And at the end of the movie, you get to see those same photos, but of the real people, and they look so much like them that it's
They
amazing.
look so much like them. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. And, it's interesting. Part of what's going on in the film that's not given a huge amount of attention is that they are getting a lot of press. And this is a big story. And it's actually playing it's in the papers in London. The daughter sees it. And so it is a big thing that's going on. And there's magazines interviewing them and stuff. And at one point, a magazine comes to take a picture of them, of the family, without him, of course. It's an article about him missing. And the photographers and the journalist who's taking the picture, they want the family to not smile. They want them to look sad and serious. And she refuses and makes the whole family smile for the photo, and doesn't let them take one without everyone smiling. And it's kind of like, we're not going to be destroyed by this. We're going to continue to be happy even in his absence. And his absence becomes its own sort of presence. I think that's kind of the "I'm still here" idea, is that if somebody disappears and you don't know if they're dead or where they are or what happened, that their absence becomes this big presence in your life. And it is a presence for her entire life. Even that final scene when she's, 90 years old and has dementia, it's still presence in their lives.
Yeah, and there's all these other things about presence that, like in the early part of the film, the father is in his den study at night, and the little boy sneaks down, and he says, "Oh, well, I could smell your cigar, so I knew you were awake,"
Yes.
and stuff. And then they play this foosball game and stuff. And again, it's a really amazing, I feel like, adaptation of a book, which is the book that it's based on was written by the son, who
Yes.
is an author and stuff. And they don't get into it in the movie, but in the epilogues, you see the son's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And what had happened, like 1979, he dove into the shallow end of like some kind of water thing, and
Oh.
he became paralyzed partially. He eventually be able to got use of his legs or his arms a little bit, and so then he started writing.
Okay. And he becomes an author.
And Walter Salles, who grew up through all of this, was friends with his family were friends with his family, and he knew them since the time he was 13 years old.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
And that's why he's wanted to tell this story for years.
Okay, yeah, and so the book, the memoir by the son, came out in 2015, I think. So it's fairly recent.
Yeah, he wanted to tell this story for a long time, and apparently, I think, this guy who wrote it, the son, he also wrote some screenplays and other things, and I think that the father's story was told in part in some other movie
Oh, okay.
that probably was more focused on like the sensational aspect of the guy and not focused on the family. You don't usually get the family, like the family, it's always focused on the subject, and then the family is sort of a background, but instead this movie focuses on the family.
Absolutely. And that just, for me, it's so interesting to see how these things affect our day-to-day life. How a parent interacts with their child is different because we're in this authoritarian world, and it changes just our day-to-day life in these really subtle ways. And we constantly try to resist by smiling or by feeding the kids. There's this amazing scene after she finds out he's dead, and she takes the kids out for ice cream. And she's just looking around the ice cream parlor and seeing all these other people who are just going about their everyday lives, and things are seemingly normal. And this idea that there can be this normalcy almost under this type of regime is almost as disturbing as the disappearances and the abuse and the torture and all that, is the fact that to some people, they're totally unaware that this is happening. They're just going on with their lives.
Earlier in the movie, the whole family goes out to that same place,
Yes.
and they are the ones having a good time. And it reminds you that even when you have to live, right? When we think of these regimes and authoritarianism taking over, the fascinating thing is that the actions do affect not every single person, but a lot of people. Some people get directed until they come knocking on the door for you. You somehow find a way to live within it. And they were finding a way to live within it. Then the horror came to them. And yet she still has to live on with her family. So now they go out, and it's really fascinating because you look around at these people that are having a good time, enjoying some ice cream, seemingly no care in the world. And they have no idea that this family sitting here, what they've gone through.
Right. And we have no idea what these other families have been through, because there were like 20,000 people who were disappeared at one point or another. And so a lot of people knew them. They were connected. And so it does affect people. But this idea of, authoritarianism does sort of take over the family a little bit. Fascism creeps into the domestic area. And instead of having a fascist household or an authoritarian household where the man is dominant and the woman, she actually is the resistance here, and her resilience and desire to go on with her life and take care of her kids and continue fighting to find out what happened to him is an incredible act of resistance on her part. And I find that kind of inspiring, that we can continue to go on and we can fight in these ways and we don't let it completely destroy us. I kept thinking, if this had happened to me, I would be like curled up in bed crying. Right. But she's so strong and so resilient that, to me, that shows that just continuing to live our lives is a powerful act of resistance.
When I first saw the movie, and I wrote about it for the paper that I work for, I wrote a review, and it was interesting because, again, we were right at this time where I had some concerns of where things might go in this country now that the election went the way it was, but hadn't really seen it all occur yet. But it struck me as that, watching a film like this where people were just having a really good life, right?
Yeah.
They were just, and that's why I think the strategic genius of the director to set up this world that they live in, you get comfortable in seeing how, well, okay, there's this dictatorship going on, but they're really enjoying their life and enjoying their family. But that just because there was a military dictatorship, because the way the government decided that these moments had to be ruined and destroyed, like that they had to come in, and most of us want to do is just live our lives and enjoy. We already have enough regular headaches just living our life. The last thing we don't want to have to think about every waking day is what our government's doing. And I do find that seems to be a tenet of fascism or a tenet of authoritarianism, is that not for 1 second do they ever want you to forget what's happening, what they're doing. It feels like we can't have a day that goes on without having to hear about what they're up to.
Yeah, and it affects us on really intimate and personal ways. It affects the way we relate to our family because we talk about these things, or we're scared or paranoid or upset, and it does creep into your day-to-day life in really insidious ways.
I mean, I think you can't put your head in the sand, but at the same time, you can't let it just completely beat you down. You've got to keep, resisting in any way you can, and even if that's just showing that we won't be defeated, like we're going to still have our lives. So I love this movie, and I thought even on a second watch, it's a very powerful film, and I really highly recommend this movie to people to see.
Same here. Yeah, really just an incredible film. It's moving. It teaches us something, but it also just has this incredible central performance that is just a wonder to watch.
I think it's Walter Salles' best film. He hasn't made a ton of movies, but this really, you can see that, it's an evocative period for him. It was stuck in his mind. He was about 13 at the time. So he kind of made friends with that family right as this was all happening. And, you watch this, and of course I didn't live in Brazil, so I don't know for sure, but this movie passes the smell test for me in recreating a period and actually making it feel like it was the period. I mean, I feel like I was dropped right back into 1970 here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, it feels, the period stuff feels so accurate. I have a quote here from Walter Salles that I'll read just because I think it sort of sums this up well. He says, at the beginning, I thought we were going to offer a reflection on the past, but little by little, it soon became clear that the film was also about the present.
That's what I think makes the movie kind of even more powerful, because
Yes.
when I watched this film, and I think I put this in my review, is that prior to the events of the last 10 years, and because we're in the second time of an administration, and especially now, I mean, this second administration
Yes.
is much different.
It's a whole different thing this time around.
But I remember always watching movies like this, and I always felt like they were warnings for the future of like, oh, aren't we glad we don't live in those times? And like,
Yes.
this was tough, and I'm glad we never lived in a country like that. And it's really horrifying when, you can see too many similarities into things going on now when you watch it. You can't just say that anymore. Like now, at my age, I've now lived through some stuff, and I can't say that my experience in this country has been as innocent as it had been, being somebody who was born after the 60s, and all that prior history. I felt like it's never been perfect, but that I was kind of living in a pretty lucky time. So I guess if you live long enough, you see some things.
And that's definitely the case here. I mean, in Brazil, the dictatorship was from 1964 to 1985, and it does eventually pass. I think, you said everyone had had enough eventually, and put this to rest, this regime. But it does eventually pass, I think.
There's a lot of South American films that we could talk about of various coups and dictatorships that,
Yes.
like it or not, many of them were supported and funded by the CIA of the United States.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I think that was the case in 64.
Yeah, we have made a mess there, and now we're making a mess here.
However, it wasn't. See, why this was a moment in time is so like 69 and then 70, there were these revolutionaries kind of resisting this military dictatorship,
Yes.
started propping up, and they started doing these kidnappings and things. And that's when the military started to crack down. And so it got like, there was a period from kind of like 69, 70 to like the early 70s where a lot of these disappearances were happening.
Yeah, and it is, we do see some of this going on now with people being arrested without due process, or not the right paperwork, or not having a court hearing, people being arrested, all that sort of stuff is happening. One thing this film reminded me about is just the paperwork, and I mentioned this before, but without good record keeping, people really can disappear.
If it happens too far and too mass, you can't keep track of it. And people in this crazy news cycle, you're like, if it happens to you, you have to really work hard to get someone to care. And that's, again, that's a concern. So this movie might be jarring to watch because it may bring up some some concerns, but it's a must watch. That's why we included it in this second season. I wouldn't say that the word pleasure is the word I would use out of this experience, but Teal and I have definitely are enjoying watching these movies, talking about them, bringing hopefully some new movies for you out there to watch and appreciate, and maybe get a better understanding of what dictatorships are, or authoritarianism is, or fascism, if this subject matter is interesting to you. Certainly there's lots you can read about it, but then when it looks at the movies, which is what we're focusing on, we're just trying to see what connections that we can make from the films that we can see.
Mm-hmm.
So again, when this airs, it will be late December, and we don't know exactly when we'll be back in 2026, but as soon as we can, we're going to be, taping the new season very shortly. And as soon as we get enough episodes, as they say, in the can, that we can start rolling them out, we will. So hopefully you won't have to wait too long in 2026, but we'll keep you posted online on fascismonfilm.com, and I guess in social media. We'll let you know where we're at, so that you don't miss anything. But, people get busy in the holidays anyway, so we'll get that all over, right? And then we'll be in the new year, and you'll be looking for
You'll be looking for some fascism in the new year.
Exactly. Because I don't think that fascism's dying down anytime soon, so But we'll be there with the films. And like I said, we're looking at what we can offer you in season 3, try to find some interesting titles, stuff that you'd be like at first like, oh, well, what's this have to do with fascism in film or something? We're looking for that, and also try to cover some of the movies that maybe we think that you think we should be covering, and that why haven't we?
Like The Great Dictator.
Yeah, that's one that we had specifically said, you know what, we're not doing The Great Dictator. That's like fascism 101. It's, I remember Madeleine Albright, when she wrote her book about Fascism: A Warning, she uses that sort of metaphorically, kind of like to encapsulate a lot of the stuff. And I was like, that just seems so basic. It seems so obvious. But
it needs to be talked about. And a lot of people haven't seen it.
And a lot of people haven't seen it, or they're like, that's the one they know. And we didn't want to give you that right off the bat. So
we're doing that now.
Yeah, and then we're probably going to find new things to think about. And I think, in terms of our own leadership, we thought maybe there's some parallels there to explore.
Yep, and there definitely are.
All right, everyone. Again, Fascism on Film, fascismonfilm.com. I'm James Kent, and this is Teal. Minton.
Thank you for listening.
Bye.